Today I will be narrating a story from r/nosleep. Nosleep is a subreddit on Reddit. I hope you enjoy. The rules of dice are pretty straightforward. The higher the number, the greater the luck. Double sixes is the golden result, obviously, but you won't be punished or penalized for a roll of double ones. I mean, their effect will be so marginal that you may as well have not bothered, but you won't be subject to bad luck as such, not from the dice at least. They work better if you have something particular in mind when you roll, and the results have the potential to be noticed immediately, dependent on your focus, of course. So why not roll all the time then? Why not just roll and roll and roll and reap the unending benefits? The answer is that, unfortunately, the use of the dice comes at a cost, as you're about to see. Sat in class as I am, watching my classmate Rise awkwardly fumble his way through his presentation. I feel the sweat bud drip down my back. I shift in my chair, reaching a trembling hand out for my bottle of water to soothe my death-dry throat. I'm terrified. It'll be my turn to go up there next, soon, to present, to give my presentation to the class. But I'm not ready. I doubt I'll ever be ready. Ready? But hell, I barely even know what I'm going to say. I just kept putting off the presentation, putting it off and putting it off. I glanced at the clock again, willing the hands to tick by faster for the lesson allotted time to run out. This is my worst nightmare. I hate standing up in front of others. I hate it. I hate it. But Rye's presentation is winding down. I know it. He knows it. He's answering the questions from the class, but the early signs of relief are all there. How I envy him. Another glance up at the clock. There is time to squeeze in one more presentation, I can tell. I squirm in my seat and try to avoid making eye contact with the teacher. I feel the weight of her rowing eyes. Don't pick me, please. Please don't pick me. Go up. Don't pick me, I pray silently. But she will. I just know it. I can sense it. Unless my hand brushes against the shape of the two little cubes in my pocket. My fingers itch. I could do it. I could roll the dice. For something so trivial. Nathan, are you insane? She might not pick you anyway, and even if she does, so what? You might think anyone here is going to remember your presentation in a week's time. I'm sure you've prepared enough as it is. All very logical thoughts, very logical indeed. Entirely worthless, though of course meaningless. In the face of my impending panic, reinforced with an army of anxiety, they fly the banner of fear, and it is fierce. Rise, with an almost audible sigh of relief, has finished his presentation. The tension in the class breaks away to a polite round of applause. And now is my chance. Now is my chance if I'm going to take it. So I hastily reach into my pocket and draw from it the dice. They are carved of a reddish wood and only ever so slightly heavier than they look. I raise them to the desk in a shaking hand, and I roll. They tumble across the papers before me on the table. I stare down at them, jaw clenched, jumping from number to number. They quickly start to settle. They land a 3 and a 4. A 7 then? Not bad, not bad. I brace and I wince with the accompanying pain. The human ability to forget is a fascinating thing, entirely necessary, I would suspect, for aid in forgiveness and in general trauma. An inheritance too. At times, how often have you awoken in the morning as a wreck, fumbling and staggering to the curtains as your head pounds in a bitter frustration? Tonight you tell yourself, tonight will be the night I change my ways. Tonight I will go to bed early, I promise. And how often have you broken that promise? By nightfall, of course. As we so often do, we have forgotten how we felt in the morning. My own memories of pain of the dice and more are returned to me in this moment. I sweat and fight to remain as still and as inconspicuous as possible, as I feel the process beginning, as I feel my flesh begin to slice. It's not as dramatic as I'm making it sound. They're like long, thin paper cuts, really. But hell, do they hurt? The first three come more or so less together, and it is difficult to identify their sources. But the fourth is clear. I feel it down my side. Again, difficult to tell without looking, but it feels a couple of inches long at least. The fifth cut slices along the side of my left foot. I clench my toes in pain. Cut 6, I feel tear through upper layers of my skin on the back of my neck, and the seventh drags across my chest as if I am being carved up by the tip of a sharpened blade. I breathe through my nose, controlling my breathing as best I can. Some of those will have drawn blood, perhaps not a lot, but they still show up clear on my white shirt if they have. The uniform policy here is relatively strict, but it's the last lesson of the day. I could probably get away with putting my coat on to cover it. Just as long as I'm not getting called up to the front. Just as long as I'm not called up to perform the presentation. I stow away the dice and glanced up to my teacher, heart pounding. Her eyes meet mine, and my pulse jumps wildly. But her scanning continues. "There's time for one more left, I think," she says as Reyes settles back into his slate. "Alicia, let's hear yours." I slump back into my chair with relief, wincing a little as the freshly formed scar on my back rubs up against the chair's hard plastic. I cautiously lean forward to draw on my coat as my heart rate starts to come down. Yes, I was an idiot for using the dice for such a mundane occurrence, but what's done is done. You've saved me again. I won't blow this opportunity. My presentation will be ready by tomorrow. I will be prepared. I never used to bring the dice to school. It seemed a foolish thing to do. They've been in my possession for around a year now, but for the first 10 months I used them pretty exclusively at home, in my room, sparingly and fleetingly, of course, for only the most important moments. The scars typically fade after about a month or so, provided they're not too deep, and aside from a couple on my face that I had to explain away, and one particularly unfortunate use of the dice, which saw 3 of the cuts appear on the same wrist. They haven't caused me much trouble. I cringe now as I recall that latter memory. I was wearing long sleeves at the time, but one of them came down and my mom saw the result. As with the scars on my face, I managed to explain them all away, but that one was still a difficult conversation. A difficult conversation indeed. But yeah, as I said, aside from those rarities, typically no one notices the scars. I'm careful around my family, and hey, it's not like any girls are going around seeing me without my clothes on anytime soon. I'm 16, but I'm a loser. Really. They're not interested in me. I don't blame them, but it's still frustrating. I shouldn't complain. I have a small but good group of friends. All dudes, of course. But hey, I have more than many. Could be worse. I pull my coat a little tighter around my shoulders as I trudge through the slush-like snow on my route home. My breath fogs in the little cloud around my mouth. I started bringing the dice to school about 2 months ago, after a typically bad altercation with our resident prick. He's a bully, I guess. Not in the beat you up and take your money sense of word, but he seems to love to exert his dominance. He's about half a foot taller than everyone else, and he just doesn't give a fuck. He does not give a fuck about anything that gives him any certain power. His name's Dean, and he picks on me because I'm an easy target. I know it, but only when he can be bothered. The incident in question, however, did actually see him get physical. After a torrent of banterous abuse in the locker rooms, he started making jokes about my sister. To the laughter of all the guys around me, I forced myself to laugh too. I tried to brush it off to defuse the situation. I clenched my fist. I hate that I did that. It frustrates me so much to think about it. But it accumulated with him shoving me to the ground when I eventually tried to get away. He called me pathetic and laughed some more. It's quite possible that he saw a few of my scars as well, though he didn't mention them at the time. The thought that he might be holding on to the knowledge to weaponize it at some later time scares me quite badly. I fume quietly as I approach the little bridge that leads through the park and back to my house. It's a nice looking thing made of stone, overlooks a rushing stream, one that goes much faster than it appears, they tell me. Underwater currents or something. The water level is higher than normal now thanks to the melting snow, and it calms me down just stopping for a moment and looking over the edge, down at the rippling water. I breathe. I started bringing the dice to school after that incident with Dean. I used them occasionally to ensure that I would be lucky enough to avoid him, or that he would simply not take my interest in taunting me in that particular day, if I suspect he was in an irritable mood, and they've served pretty well so far. An echo of a sting across my side reminds me of the cost, and I sigh as I stuff my hands into my pockets and continue home. I barely sleep that night. Worries about Dean and about my presentation swirl malevolently around in my mind, blurred with dreams about a girl I have a crush on, a girl in my year named Louise. Embarrassingly, I've used the dice on her in the past too. I only rolled a 5, but that same day the seating plan in our history class was changed, and she ended up sitting next to me. We chat occasionally in those lessons. She has a boyfriend in the year above, but whatever. That's the la vie. It's pretty common knowledge that Dean likes her too. So I get the perverse sense of satisfaction knowing that she likely talks to me more than she talks to him. Could be one of those reasons he hates me so much. I don't know. He probably doesn't hate me at all. He certainly won't spend as much time worrying about me as I do him. Ugh, school life. It's sure as shit. I awake the next morning with a cluttered and chaotic mind, and even after a night preparing my presentation, I still worry. I still fear that it isn't enough. So with the behavior of an addict, before I've even brushed my teeth, I grab the dice from my side table and roll them across the floor. A 5 and a 6. A mighty 11. I cry out a little in pain as the scars are sliced across my skin. One cuts right through a scar from the previous afternoon, and fresh blood begins to peek down my side. Another cuts up the back of my head, just behind an ear, and another slices down the side of my pelvis. For fuck's sake, I mutter through the gritted teeth as I ride out the pain. I have to stop doing this. I have to stop. I'm using the dice too much, way too much. As the day progresses, however, they do nonetheless seem to pay off. My presentation goes fantastically. I'm selected to go first, and it goes without a hitch. No one seemed to notice or care about my nerves. I spoke with easy flow and didn't forget a thing. And to top it off, the person who presented after me ended up sneezing mid-speech and snorted a load of snot all over their papers. Much to the amusement and disgust of everyone in the class, I knew in that moment that my presentation had already left the minds of my peers. There was no need to be self-conscious. I could breathe and relax. My luck didn't stop there either. Louise was moved into my science class. Not only that, but she was seated right next to me, again. She was quieter than usual though. Something seemed off. And so, riding high on the success of my presentation, I actually spoke to her, human to human, not in a weird, simple way. I actually asked her what was wrong, and it was genuine. She glanced at me, eyes wet, and I realized she was on the edge of crying.
I broke up with Matt,
she murmured quietly, sniffing and wiping her tears. Her boyfriend, Matt? My heart leapt with an accompanying rush of emotions. I felt bad for her, sure, of course I did, but damn, what an opportunity. And hell, did I do this? Was I responsible for the turn of events, given my roll of the dice? I can't be certain. Surely the dice couldn't end a relationship at the drop of a hat. Surely they create good luck. I'm only good. Right? I push these ethical concerns aside, and I take the opportunity. I'm unlikely to be in possession of such a burst of confidence again anytime soon, so I have to make the most of it. I talked to her the entire lesson, and by lunch, she has added me on Snapchat. She added me. There is hope then. Over the course of the next week, we become closer. I can scarcely believe it's happening, but it is. I'm actually getting to know her. I used the dice a couple more times too. The first roll is low, and it's hard to tell what effect that it might have had, but the second roll generates a 10, and that same day, Louisa's two best friends are both forced to miss school. Sick? Apparently. And Louise asked me on a whim if I want to spend lunch with her instead. My pulse races with excitement. Hell, I should have done this sooner. Used the dice in such a way. This is brilliant. We spend the whole of lunch just talking, though at one point she playfully punches me on the arm, and I have to fight back, a sharp spread of sudden pain as her fist connects with a series of crisscross scars beneath the sleeve. I reminded, as I often am, that my actions are foolish and short-sighted, but I can't help it. Cut me some slack. I just can't help it. What's a little pain in the face of such dramatic improvement in quality of life? It's towards the end of the first week when I overhear Louise talking about a party she's having at the weekend. A party? I've never been to a party before. Not a proper one with alcohol and stuff. We're in history class. She's talking to a girl that sits on the table behind us about it. My mouth is at once completely dry. Invite me, I urge, channeling my willpower. Come on, please, invite me, please. I think about telling the guys that I've actually been invited to a house party. The house party of a popular girl. They'll flip. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Come on, Louise. I think. Invite me. This is my chance to make myself. Please invite me. All sorts of crazy shit happens at parties. Maybe I'll get a chance and try to kiss her. She turns back to me after a minute with a smile, but no invite. I think about mentioning it. So you're having a party this weekend? Sounds fun. But it's too obvious. It's too desperate. The class goes by, and it ends the way it started, with no invite. I think you know where this is going by now. I promised myself I'd cut down, but I can't. Just one more roll, and there's only one class left in the day. Louise isn't even in it. I'm usually quite careful with the dice, but this time I just wait with agitation for the masses to disperse. A quick glance to either end the corridor, and I crouch down by the wall. I fumble for the dice and I roll. Get me invited to Louise's party, please. The dice clatter and bounce across the floor. Ideally, Dean won't be there either. Come on, dice, do your thing. They land. A 6. I chew my tongue. Will a 6 be enough? I suppose I could always try rolling again. I cringe as the first of the scars start to slice its way down my thigh, another up my spine, and another across my hip. Hopefully they won't be too deep. I look up from the dice to the end of the corridor, and my blood freezes in my veins. Dean stands, silent, watching in confusion. His shadow is long beneath the flickering buzz of the overhead lights. He looks from the dice to me, and his eyes widen. He stares in surprise as the thin scar of an invisible blade cuts from the edge of my jaw and down the side of my neck to my collar. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. If you're still here, be sure to comment down below if you'd like to see part 2. Also, leave a like and subscribe. I hope you have a great morning, evening, or night.